after Kennedy was pronounced dead at Parkland Hospital, and the controversy surrounding the autopsy and the facts that you know about what happened to Kennedy's body during that process?
From a formal criminal investigation standpoint, it would have to start with the botched autopsy of President Kennedy. Here's the President of the United States. He's assassinated, and his is one of the worst autopsies that I've ever heard. And I'm an old police reporter. Back in the day, I used to stand in on the autopsies, and I'd watch them perform, and they would explain things to me. And I saw how that you can tell which side of the body the bullet entered on, and how the wound is beveled, so you can tell, which direction it came from. We've got the technology to solve these things, and yet it wasn't solved. It was obscured. And to me, that tells the whole story right there. This was a power shift at the highest levels of the federal government. There's a very important point to the autopsy of JFK, namely that I think this was one of the slip ups, okay, to this prototype of assassinations, which, although well planned, well executed, it didn't really come off exactly the way they had planned. And one of the most important aspects of this was the fact that early on, according to the radio traffic, when they got in the plane, they were coming back from Dallas to Washington. It was obvious they had planned to go to Walter Reed Army Hospital. Okay, now I suspect that they probably had lined up some very credible autopsy doctors who would give them the verdict that they wanted. Probably thought they had everything all set. What happened there was Jackie Kennedy. She said no. Jack was in the Navy. He didn't want to go to Bethesda Naval Hospital. And so at the last minute, they had to change the hospitals, and they had to round up those three doctors who had no bullet experience, with bullet wounds. If you really study the details of the Kennedy autopsy, these three doctors were under intense pressure and manipulation by military officers who would not even allow them to do basic autopsy procedures, such as examine for bullet wounds in the clothing. They wouldn't allow him to look at the clothing. They were directing him. They said, look at this, don't look at this, okay? It's incredible, but the President of the United States got a worse autopsy than probably any wino that dies on the street of a U.S. city.
I was in the home of Jim Siebert. He's a decorated World War II veteran. He was in the FBI 20 something, 25, 26 years. He was 82 at the time I interviewed him at his home. And the whole time he knew I was there, knew what I was doing, researching the JFK assassination. And his eyes were asking me, tell me what happened, because I've been living this lie all this time. And if you notice, when you talk about our inspector lying in his report to the Warren Commission about these guys didn't take any notes, and basically they never testified for the Warren Commission, and you can tell the cover-up was in place. But their report, number one, is the shot from the rear did not go through Kennedy, did not hit him in the neck. Of course, we know now it's 5.5 to 6 inches below the neckline is where the bullet entered, 1 to 2 inches to the right of the spine. Well, the thing about this bullet and this wound is it went 2 inches and the path stops. Now, where the bullet is, I don't know. Is it the bullet found on the stretcher, on this vacated stretcher? I don't know. But their testimony is so precise as to who left the room, who came in the room, what they saw. The whole back of the head is blown out. There's nothing in the back of the head. And he knows that's an exit wound. He knows that's an exit wound, plus the fact that the bullet was moved by Gerald Ford up to the neck to make the magic bullet theory work. Well, guess what? A bullet never went through the body except the head. So therefore, there's no such thing as a magic bullet.
One of the things that bothers me so much about the JFK assassination is they always say, let's go to the videotape. And the Zapruder film is the most watched short film in history. It clearly shows that Kennedy was hit in the back, his hands go to his throat, which is a natural reflex when that happens, and then a few seconds later he was hit again. Yet, for some reason, the Warren Commission and Arlen Specter determined that it was a single bullet that killed Kennedy, hence the single bullet theory. And I just don't understand how they were able to sell that to the American people and the world.
When Kennedy goes behind the sign, he's going to be hit the first time. When he comes out, you can see he's been hit. I mean, his arms have gone up. That's the bullet, they say, went and hit him in the neck, in the back, and went and also zigzagged over and hit John Connally. Now, that's the shirt that Gerald Ford adjusted a little bit in the evidence so that it wouldn't look like it did, so it might just fit into the zigzag. But the shot that exploded his head, that was about 4 seconds later, as he goes on down Elm Street. And it goes backwards. There's no question about that. There it is on film. And then it goes forward, and they say, well, the limousine jerked then, or there may have been some kind of explosion of the packed brain tissue. We don't know. That's the one Jackie said she almost lost her mind, understandably. And you mentioned so many people who watched it, and I've seen people who've watched it and said that just wasn't expected, and it doesn't make sense. So you really have at least 2 instances where what is on the film is not what the Warren Commission said. Most of the commission didn't believe it, but 3 did, and they were one that John Kennedy had fired, so it might be a little bit of bias there anyway. But the main point was it was very controversial, and yet it was invented and accepted because they wanted to have a unanimous opinion. Dick Russell, Senator Dick Russell, one of the commissioners, one of Johnson's real sponsor in the Senate, the guy that carried him along, didn't believe it, but he went along.
Well, Warren Commissioner John McCloy, one of the most powerful men on that commission, and a man with a real checkered background, he said, look, the thing that is of utmost importance is that we show the world that the United States is not just another banana republic where the government can be changed through conspiracy. But so that was their mandate. Not truth, not to find out who actually killed Kennedy, not to find out what actually had happened, but to mollify the passions of the world. But we do know that Earl Warren, when President Johnson tried to get him to head the Warren Commission, he turned it down 3 times. He said, no. He said, I don't want to do that. He said, and I don't think that it's constitutionally correct. One branch of the government should not be investigating another branch of the government. And Johnson, and this is well documented, twisted his arm and said, you were a military officer in World War I. You have to think of the country first. And for the good of the country, you need to chair that committee and you need to come up with certain findings. And that's what they did. And if they can arm pressure Earl Warren like that, then you can figure it'd be easy enough to pressure those young lawyers writing the report.
You do it by a absolutely stacked deck in the Warren Commission. You do it because the 2 principal data gatherers for the Warren Commission were the perpetrators. Okay. And, there were so many obvious things that should have been done that weren't. When it comes to the magic bullet theory, there isn't anybody who's a pro in shooting that don't find that laughable. And I've been taught by the very best in the world, the very best. And nobody would argue with that.
One of the things that always bothers me about this is the fact that when Oswald was in the police station, Jack Ruby, a guy who owned the local strip club, just walks in there and is able to kill Oswald. And it leads me to believe that there's more to this than meets the eye, and I was wondering what you all believe was Jack Ruby's role in the JFK assassination and who gave him his marching orders.
Jack Ruby was the man with the contacts as far as with the Dallas Police Department. He knew a lot of the officers were patrons of his club. He was very important. There were tons of phone conversations, or let's see, telephone calls to known mafia people in New Orleans, in Florida, and also in Chicago prior to the assassination, up to about 5 to 7 days prior to the assassination. And then you have individuals, mob figures showing up in Dallas, of which seen with Jack Ruby. I mean, the testimony of James Files, the sightings of at the Cabana Hotel with Jack Ruby and other known mafia figures. He is very, well, no doubt, was given the task to clean up the situation with Oswald. There's just no doubt about it.
Jack Ruby's connection with organized crime goes all the way back to his childhood when he was running messages for Al Capone in Chicago. And when you're that deeply involved, if they give you marching orders, you just do it, you know. And I think Ruby was chosen to silence Oswald because he had access. Everybody at the police station knew him. Everybody in Dallas who was anybody knew him. He was able to come and go. He was in the police station on Friday night. He even corrected District Attorney Henry Wade when Henry Wade said, and Oswald belongs to the Fair Play for Cupid Committee. And Ruby said, no, that's not right, you know. So he knew much more about all this than anybody realizes. And so it was not a question of them fearing what Oswald might say. There's probably a good chance he didn't know, you know, but they couldn't take the chance. He knew something because he had been in U.S. intelligence. He was been working for the CIA. He was working for the FBI. He implicates everybody. They couldn't have that. They had to get rid of him. And of course, organized crime was the most quick and accessible way to get to him because of Jack Ruby and his accessibility to the Dallas police and this police station.
Lee had a very special position. His uncle was mafia, and that was his uncle Charles Moret. Dutz Moret was an enforcer out on the docks for Marcello. He was a former prize fighter. When he got too old to do that anymore, Marcello gave him a cushy job, you know, just doing books. But as a matter of fact, when Lee and his mother, she was widowed, moved to Dallas, Charles Moret, that is Dutz, Uncle Dutz, he said to Jack Ruby, of all people, and others there, he said, take good care of my boy. That really impressed some of those at 60 Minutes because they had found evidence that Lee Oswald and Jack Ruby knew each other, and absolutely they did.
Judith, I'm afraid you're the only one on this panel I can ask this question about. Can you tell us more about your love affair with Lee Harvey Oswald and what kind of person you want the world to know that he actually was?
I knew what kind of a man he was after we met. You see, I didn't see a wedding ring on his left hand when we first met. And it was only a few minutes after that, after I already flirted with him and everything. I was angry at my fiance for not coming and not when he said he was going to come, not writing. I was disappointed. And here was Lee Oswald standing behind me, young and very nice looking young man. And I was attracted to him immediately. To make a long story short, it turned out that he actually knew Russian. I knew Russian. This was incredible to me because I was in New Orleans. And I didn't understand at first, but when I saw the wedding ring on his right hand, I realized that he had married someone who was probably in the Soviet Union. We started talking about things like that. When I realized that he had been in the Soviet Union and had returned at the height of the Cold War without being arrested, I knew I was looking at a hero. That's how it started. But Lee Oswald had joined an abort team, and that team had been put together in order to try to save Kennedy's life. Unfortunately, it meant that Lee Oswald had to stay put in one area, and now I believe the abort team was just concocted, put together in order to make sure he would stay where he was, waiting to maybe like stop an assassin and so on. When I said this to Jim Mars, he sat up and looked at me. He said, "Nobody knows about the abort team." And I said, "Well, yeah, I know that." No, he says, "No, but I do." He's Chicago, for example. Lee told me on the phone, "I believe I saved Kennedy's life 3 weeks ago." And he explained, he said, I don't think I'm going to get out of this alive. He said, "Will you do this for me? All I ask you is you just have to stay alive and stay down and everything like that. Tell my children, tell my little girls that I was a good guy. That's all I ask of you." How can I turn that down? I had to stay quiet. I love him with all my heart. I saw him killed on television. You'll never know what that's like to live with that kind of thing.
Why do you feel the Kennedy family has been more silent than the rest of the population in terms of figuring out who killed JFK?
Jackie was scared for the life of her children, and that is a very compelling reason. In fact, I have received information on what she said the moment John Kennedy's head was shot. And she said, "I thought I would lose my mind." It is that kind of a drama, that kind of an emotional response that compelled her to know how dangerous it was. And she had to rely on Bobby to do something. Bobby, as soon as he heard about it, called and asked several people if they were involved, and they denied it. Well, I mean, what are you going to say? You're going to say, "Oh, yeah, I was there, I did it." No. It didn't take long after that for Jackie to figure out that Johnson was somehow involved, because I have inside information, but they didn't want to highlight it because, again, Bobby was killed. And Jackie just wasn't going to tolerate the danger to her family. She left for Greece and proved to be a pretty safe place to be. The Kennedys believed there was an assassination, but they couldn't say anything without endangering their family itself, the children.
It's a very, very good question, actually. But all you have to do is you go back and you realize that what happened